Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew, and you're listening live on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network and Facebook Live. Tonight I want to welcome back to the show James Keenan. He is an author, lecturer, and field investigator. He began his writing career after spending more than 25 years in law enforcement and private investigations. He holds a degree in interdisciplinary studies, and his main curriculum was anthropology and archaeology, with a focus on Mesoamerican cultures. He noticed a lack of archaeological investigation into the reason past cultures suddenly disappeared, which led him to research evidence that pointed towards the same catastrophic events taking place at a worldwide level. He has also delved into research on topics of the paranormal and ufology, and has come to believe that the paranormal, ufology, and ancient human history may have more in common than most want to admit. He's also had numerous appearances on paranormal television, podcasts, and radio shows. James, welcome back. How are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great, Chris. Hey, thanks for having me back again. I appreciate it.
I always enjoy having you on. Your research into the paranormal Uintah Basin delves deeper than any other researcher I know. And like I told you last time we spoke, I've had some of those guys from the popular Skinwalker show that on this major network I won't mention. And however entertaining the show is, it doesn't seem like we're still getting any real answers as to what's going on. In the Uintah Basin at Skinwalker Ranch, and you've also done some amazing research into ancient civilizations and cataclysms, and the answers that you've come across, the theories are fascinating, and they're really eye-opening, and they make me want to look more into this and the theories that you have. Before we get started tonight, it's been a while since I've had you on, and we're on a new radio network, so tell us more about your background and what actually led you down your path.
Sure, absolutely. So, I got my first degree in biological sciences, and then I got my second degree from the University of California at Santa Barbara, and I wanted to, I was really interested in past ancient civilizations and cultures and the differences between what culture and civilization is. So archaeology, which is basically, the study of humankind. However, I had got my degrees later in life, and prior to that, I started out in law enforcement as a police officer, worked for the district attorney's office in California as an investigator, worked in civil investigations, private investigations. I was an arson investigator for an insurance company. So, after 25 years of doing criminal and civil investigation, I realized it was never really my passion to investigate that. I was more interested in what we saw in the archaeological timeline, the historical timeline, and what was lacking or missing. And as I went through my classes and, went into the field with my professors, the things that they would tell me just didn't seem right. And if I questioned them in any way, shape, or form, they got pissed off. And they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear any alternative possible answers or theories, especially when I'm very open to, and when you label something paranormal, all that really means is we just don't understand what it is currently. A lot of things that were probably considered paranormal in the past are now science. So, why can't that be in our foreseeable future? So obviously, I retired from all that, and I decided, I'm going to go do what I want to do. So I started writing fictional books where I pumped my philosophy and my hypotheses into the story. A lot of what's in there comes from actual events or belief systems that I have. I've incorporated a lot of, alternative understanding. I believe that petroglyphs and pictographs, ancient writing, text, glyphs, not all of them are correctly been deciphered or decoded. And, these current scientists, they tell us something, especially when it's a social science, as if it's supposed to be religion or the only possible truth, or that it's science. But, even science changes over time. Nothing stays the same, and it's subjective. I've put in a lot of time out in the field, so what I see when I talk to the Native Americans, to the indigenous people, their belief system lines up a lot more with what I believe in. So I went down that path. My books are fictional. My last two are children's, in order to incorporate ufology, the paranormal, cryptozoology, ancient lost cultures, civilizations, catastrophic events for the younger generation. Because as you and I know, when you go to these lectures or conventions and you look around, the average age is getting pretty high up there. And I don't want to lose, future audiences that have that possibility of doing research. I mean, legitimate research that could actually help us find, what's really going on. So I want to let, children, I usually delve into ages 9 to 13, because I think at that point they're pretty impressionable, and it allows me to focus on what I think is important for them to understand, and hopefully, take something away from it and realize that the paranormal and ufology and science of today, history, catastrophic events, all of that may be one and the same, or one affects the other in some way, shape, or form.
I definitely agree. And a little later in the program, we're going to be discussing your new children's book. It looks awesome. Now, I want to know what you think about modern day academia, if they're ever going to come around, because it seems like right now it's just independent researchers like yourself and others that are bringing this information to the forefront, and they're still not accepting a lot of this stuff, especially when it comes to metaphysical or unexplained phenomenon. They refuse to mark it down in their history books or any curriculum or anything that they're trying to put mainstream. You think this may ever change within the next few years, or do you think they're going to keep fighting it till the end?
Science advances one funeral at a time. I always tell people that. It's the truth, we've been, and I'll stick to anthropology and archaeology because that's what I know best, and history. What the professors, current academia of today, tell you and peddle are exactly what they were taught, and they were taught by professors that were taught by people that you can take this all the way back till about the 1800s. We're learning the same information and regurgitating the same information that's been around for 2 centuries. And if you attempt to alter that paradigm and look out of the box, understandably, they get upset because they've made a living on this. And I do eventually believe that we will get to where we need to be, but it's going to be with these future generations. Currently, I'm in my late 40s, and those people my age can go either way. They can, tell you to screw off, that you're totally wrong. It's the way they've been saying for centuries and decades. But at the same time, there's part that look and try to advance the way I do. But these younger generations, I do believe, or they're more willing to critique, they're more willing to question what they're being told. I think social media allows them a different outlet to ask questions that I never had before, and they take advantage of it. If you throw a fact out there, or what you think is a fact, everybody around you suddenly Googles it to check and make sure that what you're saying is correct. So understandably, you have to know what you're saying. And at the same time, I do believe that hopefully within the next decade, maybe in the next 2 decades, there's going to be a huge shift. The paradigm is going to change as to, what's possible. And in a ufology standpoint, you and I and everyone around us knows that we're in a pretty neat and interesting time where everybody is willing to at least accept and even talk and discuss, including our government, that there's things out there that we just have no idea, what they are, what the hell's flying around in the sky. And, if those things are flying around, then we've got to look into, who they are, where they come from, and obviously what they want or what their intentions are. And that fits into social science as well as a hard factual science such as physics and things of that nature.
Yeah, definitely. Now I want to talk a little bit about your own personal paranormal experiences. I know you've had some, especially when you were a police officer. There was one experience that we've talked about on my show before, but I'd love for the audience to hear it again because it's such an amazing and terrifying story where you had a call to a house for a domestic dispute.
Yeah, it's an interesting occurrence that took place. I was in Texas as a police officer, and my partner and I had a domestic violence call. We'd been to that same location several times, and the husband and wife, constantly fought. Neighbors were constantly calling. So this evening, it's probably around 10 o'clock, we went to the location. My partner was pretty pissed. He was sick and tired of showing up. And we told the husband that he needed to gather the family, his wife and his children, in the living room. And he wanted to talk to them all. And basically he was going to set them straight. He was going to tell them, if we're coming back next time, we're just going to go ahead and arrest both of you for DV and go ahead and incarcerate you in county for the occurrence. And he gathered everybody into the living room. And while he was in there talking to them, I was probably about 10 to 15 feet behind him. I positioned myself at the front door just due to the fact that there was a staircase to the left that went upstairs to the second floor. And, you're always paranoid when you're going into somebody else's house like that. So as he was talking, someone yelled down, and they basically said to F off. And it was very loud. So my partner, asked the father, he goes, what the hell's going on? I told you, I want everybody that's in the house down here now. I want to talk to you all at once, and this crap has to stop. And the father, he said, he was pretty uncomfortable, and you could tell something was wrong. And he told my partner, everyone is here. And that just ticked my partner off more. He was like, I'm fed up with this. I'm fed up with coming here. I want to talk to everyone. And the wife and the husband chimed in again and said, we're having issues. And everyone is here, that we're all here in the living room. Then I heard a few more F-bombs from upstairs. Get the F out, you effing pigs, get the hell out of here. And then I started hearing more than one person saying it, and I was like, where the heck are all these people coming, hiding out upstairs? The father again told my partner, everyone is here. We're just having issues, and I can't explain to you what's happening. And I told my partner, hey, hold on, I'm going to go ahead and go up the stairs and get whoever is up there. So there was no light on in the hall upstairs, and only the first few steps were lit up because the light was coming from the living room. There was no light turned on there at the entry into the house. So I pulled out my mag light, started shining it up as I slowly walked up the staircase. as I started going up there, 2 or 3 people turned into like 5 or 6 people yelling at me. And they were just, they sounded very confrontational, a lot of foul language, pretty vulgar. So I slowed down. My partner backed up so he could see me going up the staircase and watch the family at the same time. I got up to the top of the staircase, and suddenly I could hear a lot of people yelling directly at me and at my partner, and it was pretty loud. And as I started walking down the hallway, I noticed movement on both sides of me. And you have to picture this hallway. This was back, the home was probably built in the early 80s. And you remember that cheap fake wood paneling that was in the homes? It looked like, the wood trees and had all those circles and everything in it. Well, that was on both sides of me. And I could swear I saw movement. So I turned my flashlight on the wood paneling, and I saw hundreds of faces in the wood, moving and turning, and they weren't 3-dimensional. They were still 2-dimensional in the panel, but you could see it clear as day. These were I don't know, I don't want to say people, they were just faces. They were angry, and the yelling got so intense that my partner thought that I was being attacked by a group, and he called out for backup. And I told my partner, I said, he yelled up to me, are you okay? What's going on? I said, I don't know what to tell you. You need to get up here now. He actually drew his weapon and called out to clear the air for emergency traffic because he thought I was in a physical confrontation already. As he came up, he was talking on the radio. He had the air cleared for emergency traffic, and he stopped right behind me thinking that, he was going to run into a large group of people. And I had my light shining on there, and I told him, I said, turn and look. And he looked, and he turned white as a ghost. Wow. And he didn't know what to do. And because the call went out as code 3, you could hear the sirens from multiple units coming to, it's like, this is what we're talking about. He's yelling up to us, and my partner starts backing down slowly because he doesn't know, what the hell to do. And don't get me wrong, I was fearful. How do you approach something like that? But at the same time, I was interested in understanding what was taking place in regards to. I knew that it wasn't natural what was happening, but at the same time, it was taking place. 2 officers came through the downstairs door, and everything stopped. There was no more yelling, no more screaming, and I flipped my light back up, and the walls were just that fake wood paneling again. And so my partner was down there backpedaling, telling him we thought there were other people up here, and we never got called back to that house. I think, I don't know what they did, but there was no more DV calls for the graveyard that's where I worked. And we obviously didn't write up what took place. We just wrote it up as an incident report that we, made contact and would come back, and there would be potential arrests if we had to return.
That is insane. Now, I imagine that's something that you don't write a report about or let your supervisors know. Am I correct?
That's exactly right. If I wanted to keep my job,
right? Yeah.
For the next day, that's exactly what took place.
Wow, that is crazy. And how much longer were you a police officer after that incident?
Only a few more months. I decided that the city I was in, Texas, was not for me, and I moved back to Southern California.
Now, have you ever had any other paranormal experiences or even seen UFO or anything like that?
So I had paranormal experiences when I was a child, and it became less and less and ended when I was 15. And it dealt with a specific shadow figure. As a matter of fact, a large part of my first book, which is fictional, is really based on what happened to me as a child. I, to this day, still believe it's because I had I had a near-death experience. Actually, I was dead for 10 minutes. I had drowned. My past blue was turning purplish before somebody found me, pulled me out, and began CPR until the paramedics got there. But yeah, so I experienced a specific shadow figure in my childhood, probably starting around the age of 4 or 5, which really opened my eyes as to there being other things. You know, your parents always tell you there's nothing, go back to bed, and you know, you realize that what adults are telling you may not really be factual. And in the course of dealing with this entity, I fully believe that what it entered and exited out of was a portal. It just, I didn't know that when I was a child, obviously, until much later in life when I started investigating this, did I come to realize that what I believe I felt in the room, this buildup of energy and just this dark ether looking blackness with like an aura or an orange color on the edges, I believe it was a portal. You know, if you read my books, I put them into a lot of the storylines. I research, I even attempt to you know, as part of my investigation, even though I do try to collect a lot of scientific data points, I always tell people I'm very open-minded, and I am really looking into the possibility of being able to find that next step or that bridge that bridges the gap between what we know currently as science and what we consider paranormal is just something we haven't learned good power source or capability of power to use that, or based on a catastrophic event in the past, we're not aligned properly from where portal usage used to be accessible to, you know, the past civilizations that were here before us.
Well, now that's a perfect time to enter into ancient civilizations and cataclysms. We know there's been several throughout our history that possibly could have wiped out almost everything, all life, all, you know, technology, any kind of advanced civilization. There may have been very little signs after some of these major cataclysms. Now, that being said, human history, it already goes back further than mainstream academia would like to admit, but it could go back even further. It could go back millions of years. There's evidence been found, fossils that are millions of years old, human footprints, evidence like this. You know, how far back do you think that advanced civilizations could possibly go?
Well, you got to think about a few things to answer that first. So, over the years, my investigation focuses on being able to show proof of it in indigenous folklore, in petroglyphs, pictographs, artifacts from the past. And I have been able to show, or can show, the potential for solar outburst, Venus, a blue star, which really was probably a galaxy explosion or some type of cosmic dust that looked like a blue star, and an inner core explosion taking place that caused a catastrophic event. So to answer your question, think about the possibility if suddenly something happened to the central core. There was an atomic explosion in Earth. And consider the fact that our planet really does act like everything else in our universe. From the nucleus of an atom, bursting from the interior, or a galaxy exploding from its central core. A planet has that same capability. The possibility is there. It's been proven by multiple scientists. So let's say you have something like that catastrophic take place, and only for a short time, maybe 12 hours, the way that we rotate is affected and slows down or stops. Suddenly you have 1,000-mile-per-hour winds, because the winds aren't going to stop. They're going to continue on the path, that they travel. They're going to also, guess what? Create massive tsunamis, what we can't even fathom taking place. And then it's going to be followed by tremendous volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, the likes of which we couldn't even comprehend, that are going to be off the charts, that we're capable of even taking and collecting data from. So imagine this huge upheaval, and where was land is now nothing but water, and all those people that existed are just in the blink of an eye either crushed together with everything else by 1,000-mile-per-hour winds. And those that survive are then hours later, drowned. And places that have millions of people in population are suddenly at the bottom of the ocean. And this huge tectonic upheaval takes place. And what was at the bottom of the ocean 10 miles down is suddenly 5 miles up in the air. All civilization, or the remains or remnants of that, would be gone. If it was metal, even better metal than titanium or tungsten that we know of today, it wouldn't exist for us to find, because it has been crushed back under the mantle, under the crust. It's under miles of water. You have to think of it in this huge picture. So suddenly we have zero knowledge of these far more advanced civilizations than we are today. Hints of the historical data that remains. Like, we look at things like Pumapunku, we look at Teotihuacan, and we see that the better build is at the bottom, because these better civilizations, these more advanced civilizations, lived a lot longer. So personally, I think we're talking about going millions and millions of years back. And it may not just be Homo sapien. There may have been species capable of thinking like us, probably better, may have looked somewhat like us, that are extinct. Or maybe they were so advanced they had to leave and go elsewhere. Is that into the water, into the earth, to the moon, to Mars, to another solar system? We don't know, because we've lost all that knowledge. And think about this, and I love to give this example. We currently love to talk about Sumer and Sumerians, that they were the originating culture of who we are today. And they're quoted, and we talk about their cuneiform writing, and you have people like Sitchin that, have the Anunnaki, or the lessons that talk about the Anunnaki gods. But guess what? And people nowadays don't really know this. We didn't know anything. We didn't know Sumer existed. The ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, they lost all knowledge of Sumeria. We didn't even start finding it or understanding that there was another culture that had gone missing until the mid-1800s. And when they started talking about the Sumerian culture, guess what? The scientists at the time were like, no, there's no way, it's BS. These are, cultures that we know about. And now today, 150 years later, 170 years later, it's science, it's factual. We know they existed. So we lost that knowledge, and that was only maybe 8,000 years back. So what have we lost? We're looking at, catastrophic events that we can show at least 130,000 years back, where it looks like civilizations existed. And this one that's about 130,000 years back was probably far more advanced than what we are and what we will be for several hundred more years if we continue to exist the way we are now. But so I honestly believe that we've lost knowledge of cultures and their civilizations from millions of years ago.
And when we look at some of the cataclysms that could have possibly happened, I mean, there are so many things that could have destroyed almost the entire planet. Not only just pole shifts or geomagnetic shifts, but we had threats from space like massive asteroids that could easily wipe out life on the planet. And there's evidence that both have happened throughout our history, right?
Oh, yeah. There are catastrophic events that are cyclical in nature. Apparently, as the Earth is traveling in the solar system, and the solar system is traveling in the Milky Way galaxy, that Milky Way galaxy is traveling through the universe. And it seems that at these certain points in time, and you can break it down to about 26,000 years, 27,000 years, 12,800 years, and then 6,450 years. There seems to be these cyclical catastrophic events, but absolutely, there's these one-offs. Look at the meteor crater here. I live in Arizona now. A mile in diameter crater struck 50,000 years ago. Look what it did. Look, if an asteroid did strike in the Gulf of Mexico, look what it did, 65 million years ago. So yes, absolutely. So we have these cyclical catastrophic events and one-offs always taking place, where at times 99% or greater of the Homo sapien population was wiped out. That 1% or less, the only way to survive was to undergo our religious beliefs of hell, because we went, into the ground and it was hell to live through. And it took hundreds of years before we were capable of coming back up and living, topside again.
One of the things that I first started researching when I started doing this was cataclysms and the current earth changes that are going on right now. And I've come to realize that just in the past few years, we've had major increases in earthquakes, volcanoes, our weather patterns have changed, and our geomagnetic north is moving rapidly towards Siberia. And you would have to think at some point something's got to give, especially with, the magnetic north moving. Do you think we could possibly see another one of these major cataclysms within our lifetime?
I do. As a matter of fact, one of my books is called 10/22/2036, and that's exactly what it discusses, that the things that are happening today are leading up. It happens slow. It happens slowly because as we're traveling through the universe, in the galaxy, in the solar system, as we advance towards this catastrophic event, things happen slowly and then start building up. So what we're seeing today, there's a potential of that maybe being the start point. And what I always like to tell people is, guess what? When there's global warming, in order for an ice age to take effect, there has to be global warming first. And that amount of precipitation has to be available in the atmosphere in order for an ice age to begin. So people are, they're worried about this global, and they go, well, maybe that's what these chemtrails are. Is the rich and the governments are aware of it, and they're trying to slow down the process by dumping things to slow down this heat up, because as we heat up and we put that amount of precipitation into the atmosphere, we are following the same pattern as the past that then brought us into an ice age. So and then also, great comment that you said in regards to the magnetic north. We see this split. It broke into two, Canada and Russia, and it seems to be pushing towards Russia now. And that's just a magnetic change. What happens if an actual change of the true, pole shifts happen? And if that happens, it's going to pull all that ice shelf, and it's heavy as hell, down under with it, and guess what happens to the rest of the crust, the rest of the ground that we're on? It moves along. It's going to shift everything. That's just how heavy it is. So there's the potential and the possibility for many events to take place, but I believe that one event leads to another. I believe it's a domino effect, and I believe we're at a beginning stage to see this. Now, does this take place in a decade, 25 years, 50 years, 100, 200 years? I don't know, because we've lost that historical data, Chris. Mesoamerica, the past cultures, the Olmec, the Maya, the Azteca, they had this knowledge, and then the Spaniards came in and burned it all. And if you look at the few codices that survived, they all talk about the planet Venus. They were so worried about Venus and its effects on Earth. So,
I'm glad you mentioned.
Like I said, I follow 4 catastrophic events.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Venus, because would you agree that our sun and the area of space it plays a major part in the Earth changes that we're experiencing right now, and the amount of cosmic energy that's coming in, cosmic radiation, and things like that are affecting it.
Oh, absolutely. We see a lot of these changes. We're also NASA's starting to monitor events that they didn't know existed until a decade or two ago, like these X points above Earth, where these portals, legitimate portals, NASA has sent up multiple satellites to collect data from them. But these portals originate in the sun, miles away, and open up within 10,000, 20,000 kilometers of the Earth. Well, as this portal opens up, and creates this event, what kind of energy is coming out of the sun directly that close to our planet? So, and solar outbursts and waves, different wavelengths that are being placed. Yeah, there's all kinds of weird things taking place. And myself, the scientists, we don't know if this is a common occurrence just at certain points in time. And again, that would lead towards a cyclical event. Or is it a one-off?
Right. Yeah, we definitely live in fascinating and terrifying times right now. Now, when you look at ancient civilizations and the evidence that we found throughout our history, modern history, through archaeological digs and things of that nature, we find evidence that there was possibly a global civilization that shared same spiritual beliefs, building styles, technology, that somehow all across the globe these civilizations shared the same things of that nature. Is that something that you found in your research as well?
Yes. So the best example is language. When you look at all the languages and you delve into petroglyphs, the stellae from all around the world, we're starting to see common occurrences of the same symbols or the same pattern. And it looks like it all came from one originating source. And when you look at artifacts and you see facial features and structures from a DNA sense that don't fit where they're found, example, Olmec artifacts look like they're Asian. And you've got to at least come to the conclusion that if you are at least not believing that they didn't originate from a single source like Atlantis or Mu, that there was an advanced culture that at least was one of three other possibilities. They were seafaring beyond what we think they were capable of. They had other capability of travel, meaning aerial, or there was some other transportation system in effect, and that's where you look at these portals like Amarumuru in Peru next to Lake Titicaca, and then in the Middle East you have what look to be these facade doors carved out of some of the
yes. I was just about to say that, these doors that look like they lead to nowhere. Yeah. And then guess what, and not many people talk about this, and I push this in my lectures. Almost in the center of every one of these is a tiny little circle that looks like some indentation where something needs to be placed into it, a key of sorts. And we have these rune stones, or these magnetic stones that we're finding everywhere that have these symbols on it. So my third form of travel or transportation that I obviously am very interested in is the potential of portals. Is that transferring of people or other from somewhere on a latitude line within the planet? Is it interdimensional? Is it planetary? Is it all three, just based upon what type of key, what frequency, what wavelength they're using? And then, like I said, we may very well be out of alignment based on a catastrophic event from how these were functioning. And then also the power source. When you talk to the indigenous people, there seems to be 2 or 3 power sources that have to come together at the exact time for the portal to take effect, meaning frequency, wavelength, electromagnetic frequency, sound involvement, and other. That's fascinating.
There's got to be an event or... Oh, no, I was just going to say there's got to be an a focal originating point. Either that's a culture, a civilization. We may not even, we may just have remnants of it now. It may be underwater. It may be completely crushed under, in the crust. Who knows?
Yeah, and when you look at some of the building techniques that are similar around the world, especially when you look at places like Pumapunku, the construction of the pyramids, Baalbek, Göbekli Tepe, even all these places had such precise cutting. The stones, how do they move these stones and erect these stones to such heights? What are your thoughts on some of the theories that they were using to construct these? I mean, precise cuts, looks like they're using boring or drilling materials that have such smooth surfaces. Some of our modern day equipment can't reproduce what they were doing then.
Yeah, you hear people say no, they did this, and they try to show that it was done with a large amount of labor and tools, technology, and metals that were available. But there's always a hole in their theory. And when I've looked at certain locations in South America and Central America, which I go to quite a bit, there is no way. This is technology that was lost. The ability to form that stone whether they were able to somehow melt it down and create them or cut them, it was tools and technology that we don't know about. And when you go to Baalbek in Lebanon and you stand near the bottom brick carvings, there is absolutely nothing that we have on this planet that can move that right now. So you have to ask yourself, how the hell did it get put in place? And you have them, where the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem is at the bottom. You have these massive stone structures there at the bottom, at the very lowest base. And then you go to Pumapunku, and it's the ones that are underground that are the largest. And it's lost technology from a lost civilization that we're just unaware about. And hopefully at some point in the near future, we make a discovery. When you think about it, there's 5% or less of the past historical data that we've come across so far. We're still standing on top of 95% that's buried below our feet, and hopefully we'll make some huge discoveries soon.
And you mentioned a few minutes ago that we didn't understand the capabilities of the ancients, such as they were more seafaring and they could possibly have flying devices. Do we have any type of evidence that shows anything that could possibly point us to that they did have flying devices, or they were a more seafaring people with advanced ways to cross the oceans?
Yes, so when you look at the Olmec culture and civilization in Mesoamerica, and you look at their ancient artifacts, we're now coming across that there may be a proto-Olmec civilization, even predating the Olmec. And from the looks of it, there had to have been something in play where they were seafaring or had the capability of aerial transportation. It looks like it originated in the Asia area, maybe in that South Pacific area. And then you're also looking, there are several books that are in Europe from the 1500s. And what's really pretty interesting about one of them is they show an aerial device. It's an airship from the year 1709. And what's really crazy is one book has it because somebody saw it on one side and drew it and talked about it and discussed it. But there was another witness on the opposite side of this aerial ship. And they logged it. It was in the news. I believe it was in Italy. It actually got caught up on the steeple of the local church as thousands of people watched it. It looked like it was being run by massive quartz crystals and devices that seemed to be bending light back and forth. So we've recorded even recently 1500s, 1600s, 1700s in these books. Unfortunately, very few of them are made public. Guess where most of these are? They're in the Vatican Library. Or they're with private entities or private individuals that, for personal gain or monetary gain, or don't want to share that information. And additional stelae from around the world show these devices in action. Petroglyphs in the desert Southwest. Some of them seem to show aerial phenomena, especially the Shumash from Southern California, where they themselves are flying around on these disc-shaped objects that are obviously in the air. One of them looks like a airplane. And then you have these gold medallions in South America that look like, they look like current aircraft. So the artifacts are there. They're few and far between. We need to start pouring in more money and more time and effort into looking for these. If we always keep it up to grant money by a university, we're not going to get anywhere, because you're having to follow the same pattern and same repetition of crap that's been in existence for the last 200 years, and it's going to lead to the same finds. And if it does lead to some type of anomalous artifact or event, two things are going to happen. It's just going to not be talked about and forgotten, or it's going to be hidden on purpose, so that what we are currently being fed as our historical data and timeline, it doesn't get bothered or interrupted or changed.
Very good, yeah. Now, James, right now we're going to take a quick break for our sponsors, so stay on the line, and we will come back at 7 o'clock Central. So in about 7 minutes, we'll be right back. So, James, stay on the line. Everybody, you're listening to James Keenan on Forbidden Knowledge News and the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. Stand by. We will be right back. Okay, I just want to take this time to thank our sponsors. The world as we knew it has forever changed, and we may not return to our old lives anytime soon. Now, with each day, the possibility of food shortages in the near future becomes more of a reality. Don't be left unprepared. Make tomorrow's survival your top priority today by building an emergency food supply right now. I personally trust and use My Patriot Supply, and you can too. They are the go-to experts in emergency preparedness. Right now, you can save $100 on a full 4-week supply and $70 on a 2-week supply of their delicious and nutritious food. It lasts up to 25 years in storage, and it'll be shipped right to your door. Just click the link right there in the description, or go to preparewithfkn.com right now to get your emergency food supply. I also want to thank our sponsor, C60 Purple Power. I've been taking C60 for almost 3 weeks now, and I feel absolutely amazing. I have increased energy, I sleep better, I have less aches and pains, and I have a great sense of well-being that I haven't felt in years. C60 is characterized as a free radical sponge with an antioxidant efficiency several hundredfold higher than conventional antioxidants. C60 may be the most powerful antioxidant yet known. And not only can it help maximize the efficiency of cells in producing energy, it may also provide cellular protection against many toxic environmental factors. It also helps to reduce inflammation in the body by neutralizing oxidative radicals. Take back control of your health and begin your C60 Purple Power journey today. Visit c60purplepower.com/knowledge10 or click the link in the description. Use coupon code knowledge10 to receive 10% off your order plus free shipping. All right, welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. You're listening on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. We are back live with my guest, James Keenan. We were discussing ancient cataclysms, and we were just starting to talk about petroglyphs of the Southwest and the Uintah Basin, and in that area. And to me, that's some of the most important evidence that we could find that things are not what we're told in our modern history books, that we maybe have been dealing with different kind of species, off-planet beings possibly, things that we don't understand of a metaphysical nature. Tell us a little bit about some of the most profound petroglyphs that you've researched and come across that point to this evidence.
Sure. So we'll go ahead and we'll stick to the Uintah Basin area in Utah. There's 3 locations there. And then just real quickly, it's kind of interesting. interesting. You have 9 Mile Canyon, you have McConkey Ranch, and you have Dinosaur National Monument. Now, if you were to, draw lines to all these and create this triangle, right in the middle happens to be Skinwalker Ranch, which is just interesting because of all the paranormal activity that takes place in there and the UAPs that are seen. But in 9 Mile Canyon and McConkey Ranch and Dinosaur National Monument, you have what looks to be some type of UFO or UAP on the glyphs at 9 Mile Canyon. And there's another one there that looks to have some type of device, aerial device, transmitting data out into space. And this is a petroglyph, remember. And they're stating that this more than likely is Fremont culture, which is from several thousand years ago, and we really don't know who the Fremont culture was. We just gave them that name from the sites that we knew they lived at. And you see this object transmitting, and there's a specific star pattern around it in the petroglyphs, and it's just crazy interesting. You can see uplift being created by additional wavy lines showing that it's being pushed upward, this device. So it's aerial. When you go to Dinosaur National Monument, you find the same thing. But this petroglyph is just incredible. I show it in my lectures. It looks to be rotating as it transmits data. It has uplift taking place. Again, there are stars or planets. Cosmology is taking place around it. There looks to be dot patterns that I believe symbolize, instead of 0 and 1s, we're looking at light and dark dots in order to have some type of something's being told. And it's just a matter of being able to crack the code, I guess you could say, as to what it means or if it's a coordinate setting. But then recently in a show, I've been talking about these two petroglyphs for well over a year now. And then we had a show, and I won't name the name of the show or what it's on, but very recently they located an object in the sky that is directly above Skinwalker Ranch, and it's going in and out of what they have stated. And we're talking about two astrophysicists saying that they saw this come in and out of portals. And I'm not an astrophysicist, but that was two of them telling you that. So it's interesting that this looks to have been happening for thousands of years. Now, what's really neat is at McConkey Ranch, and at Canyon, you also have what looks to be portals in use. And these species that are labeled anthropomorphic, they don't look human, are coming in and out of it. And what's even crazier, and I've discussed this in lectures, is we're talking the 40-degree parallel line. So if you trace that all the way across the Atlantic, you're running into places like Sardinia, Italy, Greece, Turkey, Armenia. If you match up their artifacts and their glyphs with what you see in the Southwest, they look identical. I mean, not close to it, but identical. And you're talking minutes and seconds off of GPS coordinates, which is almost, down to the T when you're talking about location. So there's my belief, or one of my theories, that we're talking about some type of portals in usage at some time in the past. Maybe we're out of alignment again, where it was latitude travel. And what's really neat is we see these giants, red-headed giants in the petroglyphs. And they're giants. They have 6 fingers, 6 toes, or they have these massive feet. they match Ute and Paiute stories, folklore and tradition of giants that were called the Siteka, that were red-headed cannibalistic giants that the Paiutes hunted down and killed because these giants were, well, eating their tribe. They were eating the Paiute. You also find these giants that look to be originating from Sardinia during their Nuragic culture period, which was about 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, Bronze Age, but they had no written language, or so we're being told so far. So, yeah, you see these incredible, you have these aerial phenomena in the petroglyphs. You have anthropomorphic creatures that, if you look at it, they look like minotaurs, giants from elsewhere. Small 3.5-foot creatures that have been spotted on the Uintah Basin recently by Ute tribe members. You have just a massive amount of what seem to be portals in use. And then when you look at folklore and you match it up, you're in the right spot for things like that to happen. And then, you come down to Uintah, Arizona, and you talk to the Navajo, and they have the same thing, and they'll tell you, they'll tell you, here, come look at this. This is a red-headed giant. They originated in Utah and branched out to star people, that they're star children, that they're descendants of these star people. Well, what's a star people? You and I would consider that, or call it, label it alien, extraterrestrial, ET. And now we have oral tradition, we have written down historical data, which are the petroglyphs, pictographs, and, when we're lucky, artifacts, showing the same events or the same things or the same species or the same other taking place in the same location. And then we're finding remnants of this same thing in other areas, in the Caucasus Mountains, on islands in Europe. And it's extremely interesting that what we're being told just doesn't make sense anymore.
Definitely.
When we look at the technology we have now, we have better understanding of what we had 100 years ago, 200 years ago. We have those capabilities now. So why aren't other anthropologists and archaeologists saying, hey, you know what? We were wrong because we didn't understand the technology at the time. Let's update the paradigm. Let's shift to get on track with the technology we know of now. You look at these anthropomorphic creatures in the petroglyphs phasing in and out. Is that showing maybe a shape-shifting event taking place? Is it technology that gives it that appearance? Or is it something didn't quite understand the ancient technology? Is it still in use today? The possibilities I always tell people, if they wrote it down or if they took the time enough to carve it into stone onto what they knew would last basically longer than any other type of material, and you see other petroglyphs where they've carved in scorpions that they've seen, snakes that they've seen, mountain goats that they've seen. Well, obviously they saw these things, and that's what they carved it in. Were some of it during a hallucinogenic state? Yeah, of course, but not everybody was out there taking an hallucinogenic drug so that they could then go carve something they saw into a rock. There's too much of it being seen for that to be just the likely cause, and too many different cultures and civilizations. And if they didn't, we're being told now that they didn't have contact with each other, well then how are they being able to represent the same events or the same creatures in their written data and oral tradition?
Right, and when you look at some of these petroglyphs that you were referring to earlier, it seems that they have depictions of what could only be portals, the animals coming out of portals, beings, entities coming in and out of portals. I mean, what else could these? If when you look at these petroglyphs, and I just go do a Google search for some of these petroglyphs in the Uintah Basin, many of them have depictions of what appear to be portals, and I'm sure you could point them in specific directions on what they should, which ones they should look at.
Absolutely. And what's interesting in that, and I know you heard my lecture a few weeks ago, is, hey, my video came on. I don't know if you're able to see that.
Hey, there you are.
Right. So what's really interesting is, and we talked about this in Kelleher and Knapp's book on the Skinwalker Ranch, they specifically talk about the Garcia Ranch, which is just east of Skinwalker Ranch. Instead of cattle mutilations, they were having bovine deaths, cattle deaths, where the cattle were dying by falling to their death, and nobody could figure out how the hell that was happening. Well, there are a couple very specific petroglyphs very close to the Garcia Ranch and Skinwalker Ranch, the Ute Reservation and the mesa between them, where it looks to show an anthropomorphic creature and an animal enter. Then another portal forms in midair, and that same anthropomorphic creature and the animal are falling to their death. So you incorporate the story that was told to Kelleher and Knapp that they wrote down in their book, where these bovine were falling to their death. Well, guess what? These bovine are walking out in the field. They walk into one portal, and then they are ejected out of the other end. That happens to unfortunately have formed up in the air above the Garcia Ranch, and they fell to their death. And it's right there. I mean, there's a petroglyph that shows this exact occurrence taking place. So I always tell people, gosh, when you're talking about the Uintah Basin and Skinwalker Ranch, there's a lot more to the story. You got to go further out. You talk to the people of Roosevelt and Myton and Fort Duchesne. They have these amazing stories of what they've seen, what's personally happened to them. And then what I like to do is I'll head out to where they were. And guess what? You can start actually collecting evidence of what they said is happening, and so little of that is taking place. People are regurgitating in that location the same information over and over again, instead of going out boots on the ground and trying to find scientific data points, trying to collect stories. Because remember, all these personal stories and things that occur to an individual, some of them may not be real, but others are definitely real, and there has to be evidence if you look hard enough. Some of this, and if we can collect enough of it, maybe we'll be able to start getting a big picture as to what is still taking happening and occurring and being seen today. And I want to be able to add to that timeline. I want to be able to hopefully find new evidence and be able to finally explain certain things that don't make sense, that really are probably left to an example. Maybe this EMF readings that are occurring are because of the massive power lines that are on the mesa. But other times, maybe the EMF coming from one of the known burial sites is something that needs to be investigated further. So we have to be more willing to allow researchers the opportunity to go there and collect data. And for the people that hold the keys of entry to those locations, I would hope that they would be more open to allowing those individuals that have theories, and it may not be all based science or scientific data, because if we're talking about the paranormal, how could it be? But obviously, if we're able to collect maybe from a gamut of different technology, video, magnetometers, EMF meters, metal detection, GPS, ground penetrating radar, at some point, if we put all that together with other researchers, I think we're going to start being able to draw a better picture. There's a physicist on the ranch that does some really incredible research, and you're not able to see everything that he does in an hour television show. And it's upsetting to me as a researcher, because he and I talk quite a bit. We have this open line of exchange of information, and if we can get more people on board to do that, I think we're going to finally be able to tell the public, or explain to the public more of what these events are, what these anomalies are that are taking place, and hopefully at some point have an answer, and maybe be able to piece that together from the ancient timeline and data and historical data that is available, because obviously it's been happening for thousands of years.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, I think it's just the independent researchers like yourself that is going to bring forth this information. Now, before we move on from petroglyphs, I want to touch on some of the entities that are actually depicted. Not only do we see entities that look like gray aliens, but like you said, other anthropomorphic entities, and some that look like what some people would consider demons. They have huge horns. They look what you can only describe as demonic. What are your thoughts on some of these depictions of these beings?
And again, like you said, with the paranormal, who's to say what's right or what's wrong? We've got to be able to leave everything on the table. I show those in my lectures, and I point to the fact that they look a lot like the Minotaur from ancient Crete and ancient southern Greece. But who's to say what they were or who they were? And then remember, too, if we're talking about catastrophic events, what is hell? Hell was where the survivors were forced to go for hundreds of years to survive until they could come back up. So were other species that just went extinct also available? You look at these bowls, and you look at these pouring devices from Marumuru and Tiwanaku. And in there's 3 periods. The period 1 is the oldest period build. And you look at the artifacts that are coming out from period 1 in that Tiwanaku area, and they have creatures on there that were extinct a long time ago. So how were they capable of knowing that they existed and putting them onto their artifacts? So obviously the same thing may happen. So what species or other type of creatures are no longer with us that our ancestors considered demons? We have the Bible, we have other religious books that talk about other races that existed before human beings, before Homo sapien, one being the genie. A lot of people believe the jinn are the angels that are discussed in the Bible. So did we lose historical data on them? It's absolutely possible that they could have existed. They could still exist, just elsewhere. And when I say elsewhere, well, if there was, again, another catastrophic event, where did they go to survive? Did they go off planet? Did they go into the planet, into Earth? Did they go underwater? Are they in a different dimension? We just don't understand how to cross over these different dimensions that supposedly exist that we see in physics being studied currently. So yeah, there's absolute opportunity to find out, and they definitely. I think what we have to do is label what would be considered demon, because obviously, if you're looking from a Christian standpoint, you're looking at something supernatural versus paranormal. And then for somebody like me, we're looking at maybe some type of species or other creature that we've just went extinct, that we just didn't know about, that could have, who knows, just like the Site Ka in the Southwest, it could have been eating our ancestors, and that's why they feared them so much, and they turned into, over a period of time through religion, into what we consider demons.
Right. And you mentioned again the possibility of some of these entities or beings or even civilizations going underground at some point. We hear the stories of the Hopi's ant people. That reminds me of that, how these beings came from underground to help them and, brought them underground to save them from cataclysms. That possibility is fascinating, that they could still have possibly some of these entities underground and we wouldn't know it.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute possibility. For anybody to rule out that there's other spots in this planet where other creatures live, you really need to look at these creatures that we know about. And I'm going to give you a great example. So there's another ranch in the Uintah Basin called Blind Frog Ranch. Interesting name, really neat. I got the opportunity to go there. There's going to be a show about it on another channel, and I can't go into it where it's going to air. But the reason it got the name Blind Frog Ranch is because supposedly the owners were told where to dig by some type of secretive space force or something of that nature. And when they dug down, I think it was between 68 and 75 feet. These blind frogs came up out of the ground, a lot of them. Well, what does that tell you? There's an ecosystem. These frogs were living in the earth, underground, and they were fine. There were a ton of them. They were clear looking because they didn't have our sun. They were blind because obviously they couldn't see, but there was still this ecosystem. So ant people, who's not to say that there's something of that nature underground? And we're just finding it. It's really neat. We're finding these spaces through seismic readers. After an earthquake, there are two types of waves. There's a secondary wave after an earthquake that travels through the entire planet, and it's showing that there's these anomalous cavities in our planet that are massive. And also these structures, are they natural, are they not natural? We're unable to tell, but they're there. So some of them are small, others are massive. We're talking hundreds of miles in length. So what little we know, we've got to quit thinking that we know everything. I think once we free our mind, like we used to when we were children, and allow that opportunity to not think we know everything, to allow ourselves the opportunity to learn again and to be open to what exactly that is, I think we're going to make great advancements, and we're going to see that what we thought was just folklore or myth, that there's some reality in the stories.
Now, something that always floors me that mainstream science and academia refuses to look at is the actual physical evidence that we've already come across of anomalous beings, like elongated skulls, giant bones, miniature bodies of little people. All these things that we actually have found physical evidence for that mainstream science just pretty much ignores or brushes off, but they exist. They found elongated skulls, especially next to megalithic structures, giant bones. So these things were out there, and I think mainstream science needs to come along and just admit that there were things that they can't explain, and they need to start looking into a lot more.
Yeah. from a standpoint with the scientists, and I think we have to be willing to finally say that what we were taught is just it's old. It's a couple hundred years old, and the possibilities of there being a different timeline and history just being completely different than what we currently think it is extremely possible. I believe it is. And like you said, there's these, and they say anomalies, but man, there seems to be more and more popping up. You know, you go to the Anthropological Museum in Mexico City, and they have the same elongated skulls there. They have some that have what seem to be red hair. And
they've even done DNA tests on them recently.
Yeah, and they have, statues and artifacts that they have labeled Olmec that sure as hell to me look like they're Persian, and they match the story of the jinn to a T. I want to go relabel it, take a pen and mark it out Olmec and put, ancient Persia in Mexico. So yeah, no, absolutely. Look at the Site Ka, like I've been stating. They've found remains of them up in northern Nevada, and the Paiute, the Ute, the Navajo, they know they existed. They had to fight them so that they wouldn't be eaten by them. So it's a matter of being open to accepting where the new data is coming from and realizing that the people that were here for a lot longer than we were may know a thing or two more than what we do.
There's a lot of debate as to when it comes to the giants, as to actually how giant or tall they were. And, there's some theories that they had 6 fingers and 6 toes. What are your thoughts? How tall do you think these actual giants got to be? And did they have 6 fingers and 6 toes? And there's evidence of red hair, like you were talking about?
Yeah, so the Bible speaks about that there was a giant on the field of battle, and he was the ancestor, and I don't remember if it was Goth or Garth, I can't quite remember, but that he had 6 fingers and 6 toes, a total of 24, and that he was there on the battlefield, and he was of great stature, far greater than anyone else. And then we have Goliath, who we believe was 8 to 9 feet tall. Then you have one, maybe 2 of these giant remains in Mexico, where I believe they've got them at about 7 to 7.5 feet. So at least 7 to 7.5 feet. I've heard, though, that some of these remains have been hidden and they've been up to 12 feet to 15 feet. But from what I have seen in the museum, at least 7.5 feet tall.
Wow. Now, when we're looking at evidence, something else that we can look at is some of the out-of-place artifacts that are found, all along the Americas, South America, in Mexico, what look like extraterrestrials. You couldn't, they couldn't be anything else but it looks like a gray alien, or even spaceships. These sculptures and carvings and little artifacts that look like little statues of ETs. What are some of the most compelling ones that you've come across?
Sure. So recently I went up to Salt Lake City and visited with Victor Camacho, who owns a little over 60 of these artifacts. And we spent quite a bit of time together, and I got to look at them under a microscope. Used different light, UV light, used some other additional technology, and they supposedly come out of Abuelos de Jalisco and 4 other locations right now. One is the Veracruz area, where the Olmec are supposedly from. Another one, I believe, is down near Oaxaca, Mexico. But they look to be what we would consider extraterrestrial or alien. They have glyphs that are not been able to be decoded or read. And after looking, I think I looked at 63 or 64 of them in his collection. There were 3 of them, and I'm going to label them here in a second into 3 different categories, but there were 3 of them that I just absolutely could not discount, based upon no recent tooling being seen. Pitting was correct for age. Stones that had been put into the main portion of the artifact looked to have the same amount of wear as the main portion, meaning that takes a massive amount of time for those individual semi-precious stones to wear down to match what it's embedded in. And you look at where it's been, it's been in the ground. If it's been in the ground for thousands of years, there's obviously going to be a lot of decay taking place naturally, and it matches. Parts of the glyph and the writing are missing, where it doesn't look like it was done purposely to make this look like an ancient artifact. So there's 3 of them that just made me scratch my head, because the subject matter is just, it's incredible. And I show this when I'm speaking, and I categorize them into 3 categories. So one is obviously they're very recent and they're fakes, and you can tell by tooling, you can tell that the pitting is just wrong, that acid was used to age it, or some type of acetone or some other type of technique. Second, you have these ones that are of incredible age. They're ancient, and those are those 3 that I'm talking about. I can't make heads or tails of the subject matter being on them and the age that they are. They came out supposedly at Ojuelos de Jalisco, all 3 of them. And then my third category is they're copies, but they're ancient copies, meaning that these originals must have been thousands of years old, and they were being copied up until a couple thousand years ago, because they're still aged. They're copies of an archaic artifact. So that just throws another wrench into everything, as to now we've obviously lost more historical data on who these civilizations and cultures were.
Now, do you have any idea about...
Then you're talking about, in order for that to have been a copy, how long back did it go? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, is there any idea of around how old some of these artifacts, the older ones, were?
So I'm not going to put my name behind any of that, just due to the fact that the chain of custody can't be proven. I don't feel comfortable with the way that this supposed resin or glue was taken from one individual in Germany, or he's German, and I think he may live in California, and that his findings from the University of Arizona are being used for all these artifacts, which just goes to push that many of them are fake. But the chain of custody, if I can't see it and verify that, it doesn't exist. So we talked to the University of Arizona, and they're pretty upset that their name has been, flung through the dirt with these artifacts, because what they did test did come back of that age. We're talking some 9,000 plus years in age, but we don't know where that resin or that glue came from. They stated that gems or stones were pulled out of the main artifact, and obviously it had to have been put in there by some type of organic material, some type of organic glue, and that was what was tested. So whatever was tested did age, carbon date to anywhere between, I think, 2,000 years and 9,000 years. There were several datings, but and I think there was another university also that dated it, but before they knew what was going to happen, and unfortunately whoever did this really screwed and hosed everyone else up now, because what I would have loved to do was to take some of Victor's artifacts and correctly document the removal of these gemstones or additional stones, properly take the organic material, and then create a chain of custody, just like you would in a criminal investigation, or that when you're dating something for the university that's going to go into the museum, and correctly do the chain of custody. I think the universities would have felt a lot better about that taking place. We've attempted to even get private companies now to date it, and they won't do it because they're scared, that their name's going to, be run through the mud like what happened to U of A. And so I can't give you an aging of any of these, because I just don't believe it until I see it. And what I would love to do is at some point, unfortunately, with what's taken place in the world currently with, the virus, not being able to travel, we had plans of going down to Huelos de Jalisco and properly documenting an excavation. I wanted to properly excavate, video document it, label and correctly date as we went down stratigraphically, and then if we found and located something, correctly remove it, have it all documented, and make sure the chain of custody was correct, get it to the proper university so that if there is any organic material, it could be dated, or at least keep that chain of custody where now I could present it to scientists, social scientists, physical scientists, and be able to say, hey, look, this legitimately was found where it was found. Or you know what, Chris, I may come back and say I couldn't do it because it wasn't possible, because it's not real, but at least one way or the other we'd be able to come to the truth and find out what's happening. Because like I said, 3 of these artifacts are just amazing. I don't know how it could be what it is unless it's of actual archaic age. And then to see the subject matter on it is just incredible, because we're talking about anthropomorphic figures that look of extraterrestrial nature or interdimensional, or wherever they originate from elsewhere. And that days of years ago, and that contact had a huge undertaking on to where we are today on maybe even from a deoxyribonucleic acid standpoint of hybridization or creation of modern day human, but at least they had some type of impact on culture, and then culture led to the civilizations, to modern day civilization as we know it today.
Right, fair enough. All right, well, now for the last few minutes that we have, I'd like to talk about some of the actual activity of the Uintah Basin and Skinwalker Ranch. if you haven't heard of Skinwalker Ranch now, with all the shows and everything going on, you need to crawl out from under the rock because it's all over the place. But a few years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, not many people were looking into this, and it wasn't a huge phenomenon like it is now. Even though there were, government entities looking into this and Bigelow and all this stuff, it wasn't mainstream as it is now. But now that, we have these shows on and it's blowing up, it seems, more people know about this phenomenon. And the phenomenon ranges from UFOs, ghosts, cryptid creatures, electromagnetic anomalies, all kinds of animal mutilations. I mean, anything paranormal that would fall into that category seems to occur there. Now, as far as an answer to what it could be, it doesn't seem like we are any closer, especially learning from any of the shows that are on now. But some of the research that you're doing is very compelling as to getting closer to some of what may be going on behind this phenomenon. Now, for those that don't know, tell us exactly what is a skinwalker and how did that lore begin?
Yeah, so Skinwalker is, for that area, for the Ute, and obviously other tribes have similarities, but we'll stick to the Uintah Basin. So a Skinwalker is a shapeshifter, and Skinwalker Ranch is named after this phenomenon. The shapeshifters of that area are from the Navajo tribe. They're Navajo witches that practice what we would consider dark arts. They're called in Navajo Yi Naldlushi, and what supposedly took place was the Navajo were there before the Ute. They went to war over a great period of time. Eventually the Ute kicked the Navajo out of that area. Upon retreat of the Navajo leaving, they cursed the Ute, they cursed the land with the skinwalkers, with the Yinaldlushi. And because they're witches that practice dark arts, you get all types of things, magic taking place. So you have these creatures that can shapeshift into anything they want to, but they take shape mostly, or at least what we consider mostly of wolf, coyote, bear, bobcat, things that you would see normally on the basin or in the Ashley National Forest area. They're solo creatures. They like to supposedly work alone, but there are more than one supposedly in the area. And they're tricksters. They may be a part of the phenomenon, or they may be one of multiple phenomena taking place. So this folklore, this myth of them is taken seriously in Native American culture. The Ute consider it factual. It's not something to be messed with. 100 years ago, the mesa above Skinwalker Ranch and the ranch was considered off limits. Not anybody can really tell you exactly why, because so much time has passed, but there's different theories as to why. The land being cursed is probably, we'll leave it at that, because that covers just this, huge gamut of what it possibly could be. So that's where we are currently with what a skinwalker is. And Skinwalker Ranch just to be called the UFO Ranch before it became Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, and that's one of the main activities there is UFOs. But something else that we see there is portal activity. I was watching one of these episodes that came on the show, and they were talking about how it seems that some of the cattle would fall from the sky and land. It seems like they were falling out of portals, or they would find an animal in a strange location that it seems like it wouldn't be able to get to, and in some cases, animals hanging from power lines. Do you think that this could possibly be an answer that there are portals opening up in this area?
Yeah, so my ongoing theory is that whatever's in that area, there's a huge power source of some nature. I believe it's underground. We don't quite understand it. Could it be natural? Possibly. Could it have been from a lost civilization? That's also possible. Could it be of extraterrestrial origin, meaning could it have been an asteroid? Absolutely. That may be an excellent possibility, but are drawn to that location because of the energy. So we're seeing, like you said, all this different phenomena. We're seeing UFOs, UAP. We're seeing shapeshifters, skinwalkers in the area. We're seeing portal activity in the area. And then we're also seeing paranormal supernatural events like poltergeists occurring at locations on the mesa and on the ranch and elsewhere. It's not just there, it's around. I think actually the focal point's a little bit further north from the ranch. But we have all these events taking place. Is it because they're drawn to it, or is it because of a power source? Or is the power source creating the activity? So is it all these things coming to it, or is it something with output, putting it out? But it's absolutely one of these few areas in the world where just so much stuff takes place, and it's not one thing happening, and they're not necessarily related. They could be completely different. There seems to be what people would consider tricksters involved, where it almost seems sentient. It's capable of knowing, manipulating people, or knowing what they're thinking before. A lot of people, if you talk to the locals, they have some really incredible stories, based upon UFO sightings, based upon tricksters, based upon shapeshifters, based upon portal events taking place. So yeah, everything. Just the gamut of the paranormal happening.
Now, you've had an interesting theory that there possibly could be some sort of ancient technology involved that was taught to the ancients and could possibly still be in play today that is kind of connecting all this activity.
Sure. So I think I discussed it a little bit too. There's a possibility that the indigenous people came across some type of technology that they found they didn't understand, but they're capable of using, that presents cloaking capability or what looks to be shape-shifting, whether they can actually physically shape-shift or whether it gives the appearance of shape-shifting. But it's interesting because during the Bigelow time, we're now starting to see that the government and private entities look like they may have been interested and even funded by the government to record and see how paranormal phenomena acts on the human body and the human mind. So whatever was in play seems to have gotten the attention of people in the government and private corporations that teamed up with the government. Maybe it was. Maybe they found the technology and they're trying to manipulate that technology or reverse engineer it. But definitely it looks now at this point like they were wanting to see Kiki. And unfortunately for some of those people that were located at the ranch years ago, it looks like they were being used as guinea pigs without their knowing, which included things like getting MRIs and not being told what the results were. But just some strange things and some declassified stuff, came out recently in the last couple of years, even stating that, they didn't say it was Skinwalker Ranch, but we're pretty sure we know that was where the testing was happening. But yeah, they wanted to see what this type of energy was capable of doing to humans. And I don't know if they were trying to weaponize it or just wanted to, record the data events that came out of it. But again, add this to the paranormal. Throw in the fact now that you have government involved and huge aerospace corporations involved, and it just adds to the zest of the Uintah Basin and Skinwalker Ranch and Fort Duchesne and Blind Frog Ranch, and and the reservoir on the reservation, to all the weird stuff that happens there. It's gives me the opportunity to do a lot of investigation and research on many subjects and subject matter at one time, that's why I love traveling back up to Northeast Utah as often as I can.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that area is, you can just feel the energy out there. Now, speaking of the government and military presence, there is definitely a military presence in the area, in that whole area, really. And there are some that argue that this is just either military experiments, black projects, nothing paranormal, that we're all doing it. But you can't really argue that whenever this activity was happening before there was any military presence, for hundreds, even thousands of years, right?
Right, and that's absolutely what my when I eventually finish my first non-fictional book, it's going to be about all my research in Mesoamerica, South America, the Uintah Basin. But a great portion of that's going to show that we have this historical data going back thousands of years that this area had this paranormal activity taking place. So for people to say it's just very recent, that prior to the Shermans, none of this was known or it was all bogus, that's not true. When you talk to the locals, unfortunately, it's sad, Junior Hicks passed away very recently, I think in the last couple weeks, and he was a go-to person for collecting UFO information, and he had been doing it since I think the 1950s. And if you go to the Historical Center in Vernal, you can find articles where NORAD was tracking. People called up NORAD and they admit they were tracking something that they didn't know was traveling through the Uintah Basin. So yeah, it's been there a lot longer than, or at least longer than the U.S. government's been around.
Yeah, definitely. I would have to agree 100%. Now, the last few minutes that we have, I'd like to talk about your new book that was released already, actually. It's a children's book called The Shapeshifter Scare. Tell us all about it.
Sure, yeah. It came out on Friday. So I have a series that I've been writing. The first one was a UFO and an Alien. Part 2 is The Shapeshifter Scare. What I'm doing is there's very few books out there that talk about ufology, cryptozoology, the paranormal, the supernatural for children. And as you know, I see you all the time at the same conventions when you go there. The people that attend are aging. And it's getting up there, and there's very few of the young generation that show up. And when they do, everybody's fascinated. They want to talk to the kids and find out what they think about this. And so what I decided to do, partially retired, I went back to I took up long-term substitute teaching, so I could to know 4th, 5th, and 6th graders mostly. And started delving into ufology with the first book. I wanted to explain to them what it was through a good fictional story, that also presented moral dilemmas and how to overcome them and what equality and equity mean, but really also to introduce them to the terms that we use and to the paranormal or other possibilities that are out there than just what they're being taught in school. And that it eventually, all that science or what's considered science fiction of the time may very well become the science of tomorrow. So my second book, which came out on Friday, like I said, The Shapeshifter Scare, went from, it has the same original character. He moves from Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado area to Roosevelt, Utah, where Skinwalker Ranch is at. And I get the opportunity now to introduce the kids to the phenomena that takes place in Fort Duchesne and with the Ute Indian, with the reservation, with Maiton, with Roosevelt. And then we get to go into portals. You and I have talked before. I'm fascinated by portals provide to us in means of travel. So in book 1 and book 2, I go into even greater detail. Now, instead of interplanetary travel through them, or space travel through them, now we go into different realms and dimensions that Native Americans discuss. And at the same time, again, present those moral dilemmas that 9 to 13-year-olds are going to face, and weave the two together into a good fictional story. And part 3 is going to be called Bigfoot and Tommy Smith, and it's obviously going to be on cryptozoology. So
that is awesome. Very nice. Now, before you go, James, I really appreciate the research you do, connecting UFOs and the paranormal, and all of this together, because I think that's the answer. If more ufologists got with paranormal researchers, and paranormal researchers got with researchers of energy and consciousness, I mean, we could understand so much more about all these phenomenon, because it's connected in profound ways. Wouldn't you agree that it's just all connected?
I do, and to add to that just a little bit, I like to melt the science and the scientific data points with what people would consider the science fiction right now, because it's paranormal, it's not proven, we don't understand it yet. I think what we need to do in the paranormal community is move away from the way we look running around with an EMF reader, not really understanding what the hell we're picking up with it. You hear all the time on TV, oh, I just got a 36.2 reading. Well, what does 36.2 mean? Nobody knows what the hell that means, Explain what you're reading, and explain to me what you're going to be able to do with that information. Around and never collecting anything or being able to come to some type of end game or conclusion, and then present all that information and data and tell other scientists, here, take it and run with it. Now add to it. If it's wrong, prove that it's wrong. If it's right, hey, let's bring it and move it forward more. Let's shift the paradigm. But let's quit presenting the same old information. Let's start trying to find new data points, and then let's try to educate people on television and on podcasts on exactly what we're looking at. If I have a proton magnetometer out, I better be explaining to you what a proton magnetometer is, how it's able to read, what the magnetic reading of the Earth is at that specific location, and then explain what the numbers are and what's anomalous about it, or that it's just normal. And then come together, like you said, all sides, and really start figuring out, and instead of just running around in a circle next. And I'm absolutely there, willing to share my information. I don't hold much back. Constantly in contact with great people like the geologist Dr. Bruce Cornett, I can't, unfortunately, I can't say names because I have an NDA on a couple things, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. So, and between different spots, let's bring the people of Blind Frog Ranch with the people of Skinwalker Ranch and other locations where petroglyphs are, and Bottle Hollow Reservoir. Let's start looking at it all as one big event or energy event and try to figure it out from there.
Definitely, I agree 100%. Now, before you go, one more thing. You mentioned that you would be doing a television show or a segment on a television show. Is there anything you could tell us at all about it?
I can't. I'm going to be on a show in its coming season. It actually doesn't. It's not in Utah, so it's going to be elsewhere. So, and then I have several events that I'm going to be speaking with Orange County MUFON and Phoenix MUFON online. It seems like everybody's going to this online now, due to the times. So I'm not quite sure. I think you can go to their website and see if that's going to be available to the public. If you'd like to actually see the lecture and all the data that I present. Like we did a few weeks ago on your online convention, which was just fantastic, having the opportunity to reach such a greater amount of people all around the world at one time. That was just an awesome opportunity to be a part of, and thank you.
Oh, thank you. That was an awesome presentation, one of my favorite. James, thank you so much for coming on tonight. That was awesome information. I'm definitely going to have you back on soon.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much. I appreciate the time that you gave me.
All right, James. Well, you have an excellent night.
Do the same. Take care. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everyone. That is a wrap for this episode of Forbidden Knowledge News. You are listening on the Global Enlightenment Radio Network. I will be back same time, 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern, every Sunday for another 2-hour show. Until then, good night, everyone.